Welcome to Mountain Strong. Today we are at Bird Ridge, which is a stop along the road that heads south from Anchorage to Seward. A beautiful stretch of road, as you remember from previous videos, and this is a beautiful stop to make along that stretch of road. This is a trail which actually faces the south, and so because it faces the south, the snow on here tends to melt quicker than on other trails, and so this is a very popular spring hike. It's also a popular conditioning hike. It goes pretty much straight up, and it will do so for a long way. I've stopped, I hope halfway, probably not halfway, that's probably the optimist in me speaking, but I've stopped and I saw this beautiful scene and I thought, well, hey, what a great place to both take a break and also to shoot a Mountain Strong video. Today we're going to be having a look at Psalm 41 together, and as you can see, I've forgotten my Bible, which is really unfortunate because I've also lost my little sticky note that I have with my notes on it, but we'll do our best to press on and make the most of the day. So Psalm 41, let's go ahead and read it. Blessed is the one who considers the poor. In the day of trouble the Lord delivers him. The Lord protects him and keeps him alive. He is called blessed in the land. You do not give him up to the will of his enemies. The Lord sustains him on his sickbed. In his illness you restore him to full health. As for me, I said, O Lord, be gracious to me. Heal me, for I have sinned against you. My enemies say of me in malice, when will he die, and his name perish? And when one comes to see me, he utters empty words, while his heart gathers iniquity. When he goes out, he tells it abroad. All who hate me whisper together about me. They imagine the worst for me. They say a deadly thing is poured out on him. He will not rise again from where he lies. Even my close friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted his heel against me. But you, O Lord, be gracious to me, and raise me up that I may repay them. By this I know that you delight in me. My enemy will not shout in triumph over me. But you have upheld me because of my integrity, and set me in your presence forever. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Amen and amen. As we reflect on the words of this psalm, we can clearly see one who is sick. And as we think about the psalmist in this psalm being sick, I want you to notice how, yet again, we see someone approaching prayer with a really wonderful understanding of the way that prayer works. Notice how in these first three verses, he approaches prayer from the standpoint of faith, and how he says, in the day of trouble, the Lord delivers him in verse 1. The Lord protects him, keeps him alive. He is called blessed in the land, the person who is poor, as he said in that first phrase. The Lord sustains him on his sickbed, and in his illness you restore him, speaking to God, to full health. So already he's realizing that blessings come from the Lord. The Lord is the one who has the ability to restore him from his sickness, and that's a wonderful way to begin a prayer. But the real issue in this psalm is not the sickness that the psalmist is facing. It's almost as though that's taken a back seat to what is a more pressing problem to the psalmist, the way that others are treating him in the midst of his sickness. You see that there are a number of different responses to his sickness. In verse 5, you have some who are saying of him in malice, when is he going to die? You have some people who come that are hypocrites in verses 6 and 7. They utter words which he sees as being empty words, and then he sees that iniquity gathering up in their hearts, and he goes out and tells what he really thinks. And what he really thinks, of course, is that the worst is going to happen. You actually get the picture when you think about verse 7 from a 21st century perspective of someone sitting in a hospital bed and people are saying, you're going to get better, everything's going to be okay, but then in the corner of the room they're whispering about his real condition and what's really going to happen. Sick people notice that. The psalmist noticed that when people did that to him. And so I don't know why we think that that's an okay thing to do. But yet still, as we consider the way that people are responding to this sickness, we've got some people who want him dead. We've got some hypocrites who are saying one thing to his face and are saying another thing behind his back. You've got, in verse 8, those who are saying that a deadly thing is poured out on him. He's not going to rise. And so you've got people who are not trying to comfort him falsely, but are not being very optimistic about the situation either. But then you've got the statement made in verse 9 about the psalmist's close friend who he says has lifted up his heel against him. I can't help but think of Genesis 3:15, where the seed of woman was said to bruise the head of Satan, even as Satan bruised his heel. And you get that picture of both a striking blow, but perhaps if it is a friend, maybe not a striking blow, but maybe he's turning his heel. Maybe he's walking away from his friend, the psalmist, when he needs him most. The psalmist feels betrayed, he feels misunderstood, he feels not cared for, he feels as though people are expecting the worst in regards to him. But he says, "O Lord, be gracious to me and raise me up." The attitude that he has is that he may repay them. Now, this may very well be from the Old Testament point of view of enacting vengeance upon those whom it is due, but it also may be seen as perhaps the psalmist saying, if I ever see them in this position, I'll know how not to act. He says in verse 11, though, "By this I know that you delight in me. My enemy will not shout in triumph over me." And it's hard to read that statement, by this, by the thing he's just said, the fact that he will be raised up, or by this, that his enemy will not triumph over him. Well, I don't know that the psalmist knows that he's going to recover from this. But I do believe that for the psalmist, faith is now coming back into the picture. Because in verse 12 he says, "You have upheld me because of my integrity and set me in your presence forever." And out of that he says words of praise to the Lord in verse 13. And so if I were to narrow down a lesson for this psalm, it would once again, of course, be the lesson of coming to God in faith when we are facing difficulties, obviously seeing the solution as much as we see the problem, or as being as real and possible as we see the problem being. But I think that there's a stronger lesson to be taken here from those friends and those enemies and the people that were surrounding this sickness, the way that they responded. You know, Job's friends, when he thought about them, he said that they were miserable comforters, and it seems like the psalmist is surrounded by a whole lot of those kind of people as well. We need to be mindful of people who are sick. We need to be honest with them, but we need to be hopeful in front of them. We need to prepare them for the worst, but prepare them also for the best, and be there no matter which end of the spectrum they might be facing. Sickness is not a time to abandon people. It's a time to rally around people, to support them, to help them. I'm sorry for the psalmist that he didn't have that loving and supportive network around him, but I hope that we learn the lesson that maybe his friends didn't learn. And I hope that we rally around people in our local congregations, in the brotherhood, and also as we have opportunity to do good to all men in that way. May God bless us to be better comforters than the psalmist had, and may God bless us also to be able to have the faith that he had in the face of sickness.